The man who infamously gave children of the 1980s everywhere nightmares, Don Bluth has often been hailed as one of the most successful animation directors of the 20th century to have worked primarily outside of Disney or Warner Brothers. But despite his widespread success, the man wasn't without his controversies, with many famously feeling that his movies were too dark, and sometimes too sad, for kids. Now, Bluth never let this debate affect his movie making, as he felt it was necessary to show the dark side of human existence in order to make people appreciate the better parts of it. And speaking on if he sometimes took things too far for a children's movie, Bluth said that he personally felt that children could handle a dark story so long as there was a happy ending, as well as not take things too far, such as showing graphic violence and murder, obviously. And over the years, many have debated over how much he was right about that, as well as if he still took things too far, even if he was right to say that. And today, I'd like to try and give my opinion on this topic. Was Don Bluth right to make his movies pretty dang dark by children's standards, or not? And spoilers may abound for a couple of his movies, so if there's one you haven't seen yet and don't want ruined, you might want to click off the video. Now, Don Bluth's claims on what is and isn't suitable for children are really nothing new. Even Jim Henson, the man behind both The Muppets and Sesame Street, said that he believed children liked to be scared and that it was unhealthy for them to grow up without feeling fear. Though he too faced some pushback for feeling this way, as his dark fantasy, The Dark Crystal, ended up taking years to find the audience and appreciation it deserved. But the point is, there are many out there who do believe that it's okay for children to be exposed to dark stories, so long as they aren't too dark and still do accommodate the kids when necessary. And if you take a look at his filmography, that is what Bluth seemed to strive for more often than not. Take An American Tail, for example. A movie that famously had both kids and adults crying over the separation of Fievel and his family, as well as tackling some pretty heavy themes such as immigration, the false promises of the desperate, and inescapable poverty. Bluth certainly doesn't do much to sugarcoat the realities of the poor searching for a new home. But at the same time, it does have its moments of levity, and in the end Fievel is reunited with his family and all ends well. It's just that everybody had to go through a lot of hardship to get there. Or for another example of that, take The Secret of NIMH. Even darker than An American Tail, this movie introduces some downright adult concepts to the mix, and pretty much only combats this by having the ending involve magic and the goodness of people being the key to ensuring the happy ending that Bluth believed was so important. But even with all of that, the movie has earned praise by many, with many an adult admitting to being fascinated by some of the concepts brought up, especially in regards to the experiments and advanced intelligence of the rats and mice. But in that right there is what I believe to be one of the biggest problems surrounding this whole debate. It's adults discussing what's suitable for children. As I've already gone over in my Pixar Problem series, which you can find a link in the description to, as well as quite a few other videos, one of the biggest problems in judging kids' movies is that it's the adults who write the reviews, earn the money to buy the tickets, and ultimately decide which movies they want to take their children to see. And because of that, they're much more likely to appreciate a kids' movie that pushes the boundaries on what's acceptable for them and is rather mature in style over a more conventional kids' movie that is made strictly to entertain children. And as I've stressed in many of those other videos, I believe that this has only gotten worse over time, to the point that it feels like adults won't even accept a children's movie unless it is way too mature for children, to the point that it almost forgets about the kids entirely. Now, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with Don Bluth? Are you saying that he's responsible for starting this trend? No, absolutely not. In fact, I actually agree with him. I do believe that children can handle darker stories so long as they aren't too dark and have their happy ending. But at the same time, I believe that the same is true for a lot of adults out there as well. Most people just go to the movies to be entertained, and thus are a lot more likely to be forgiving of dark or sad elements in a story if things work out in the end. In fact, you'll often find that the most debated parts about movies are the ending, specifically because that's the part that leaves the most impression on the audience, as that's the last thing they're going to see. So as far as kids go, if the ending is a happy one, then they're more likely to not think as much about the scary or sad stuff that happened beforehand, especially if that ending actively reverses the consequences of those earlier scenes. But at the same time, do all children's movies have to be dark? Do all of them have to be mature? Because that's certainly what it feels like nowadays. With the rise of Pixar and their extremely mature style of storytelling, it seems that all kids' movies seem to be aiming more for appealing to adults than the children they claim they're making the movie for. And I don't know if even Don Bluth would think it's a good thing for all of children's entertainment to be on the dark and mature side. There is a time and place for children to just have fun with a movie and not be left sad, scared, or most importantly, confused by it. Because when you really look at it, what are often considered to be kids' movies these days are actually very complex and mature in nature, to the point that it's the adults who are liable to appreciate them a lot more than the children. Now, please don't get me wrong here. As I've explained on multiple occasions, I do think that Pixar is great at storytelling and that their methods can be great ones. But I just don't think they often take into account that they're supposed to be making their movies for kids, and their imitators are even more guilty of that. In fact, when Sausage Party, which was specifically designed to be a deconstructive parody of Pixar films, came out, many complained that it was a lot less mature than the movies it was parodying. And listen, I'm not saying that all kids' movies, or even most of them, should be nothing but juvenile humor that appeals to the lowest demographic. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that I believe kids' movies have gone too far in the other direction and have started to become so mature and adult-oriented that the children can barely even understand what they're watching anymore. And what only makes this worse is that adults have come to expect that from their children's entertainment, meaning that they won't tolerate anything that actually tries to be just a fun movie for kids and doesn't have Pixar's level of maturity and complexity. In other words, to me at least, it seems that kids' movies have become less about entertaining children and more about giving adults an emotional experience, to the point that they won't tolerate anything less from them. And I just have to say, is that really fair to the children? Because it's one thing to have an occasional movie that's more dark and mature for them, but shouldn't they be able to have their movies that are just fun and entertaining too? Because once again, I actually think Don Bluth is right. I just think that everybody's taken it too far because of Pixar's success. To many adults, kids' movies have become about making them feel something, and that's not a good thing. It's okay for children to be subjected to darker elements of this world through movies, and have movies that respect their intelligence by delving into more mature topics. But at the same time, not every movie they watch needs to or should do that. Children should be allowed to have their movies that maybe aren't as sophisticated or mature, but are simply a blast to watch and entertain them for a while. And I do believe that even Don Bluth, a man who actively campaigned for and made darker kids' movies, would agree with me on that. Okay, I think that was everything I wanted to cover. And sorry if this video seemed a little all over the place, but I just felt there were a few different things that needed to be said here. But either way, now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that Don Bluth was right to think that children could handle darker stories? And do you believe that the more mature style of storytelling in kids' movies has gotten out of hand in recent years? Or do you disagree with everything I said? Please let me know whatever you think in the comments below. And as I just said, you do not have to agree with me just because you watched this video. You can think I was absolutely 100% wrong if you want to, and I nor anybody else can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. It's really appreciated. And I hope to see you all next time.